No. Okay, fascinating research we're doing here together, folks. Let's get going. Let me share my screen. Which one is shared? This one? Which one are you seeing? Talmud Torah?
Talmud Torah is an expression of Malchus Shema.
Good. So here we are in the Shema. So we started off Shema Yisroel, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and then we said you have to love God. And then we said, they should be on your heart, these matters. And now it says, Vishinantam levanecha. And one should, and it's an interesting word, Vishinantam. Here we are, Vishinantam levanecha. What is this word? Shinun, you, that's you plural, tam. So here, Vishinantam, you should, something, levanecha is normally translated to your children, to your children. So Rashi explains, where's our Rashi? Can I move the control somewhere?
Oops.
Oh yeah, much better down there. Okay. So Rashi says, Vishinantam levanecha. What does it mean? He says, this word, shinun, expresses the idea of being sharply impressed. The meaning being that they should be impressed, familiar in your mouth, so that if a person asks you anything concerning them, you will not need to stammer, hesitate about it, but tell him forthwith. And the Hebrew is a bit nicer. Lashon chidut, it's sharp. You shall make, they should, Vishinantam levanecha means, really, you should teach your children. But Rashi is saying, they should be so, the words of Torah should be so clear to you that if someone would ask you a question, you've got it immediately, which means you've mastered it. You have to have a mastery of Torah. The Guaria, that's the Maharal of Prague, he wrote a book on Rashi. So he writes, because Vahatam, you know why Torah has to be this clear to you? The Torah should become his Torah. Now, what is he referring to? He's referring to a verse right at the beginning of Psalms. Psalm starts like this. Psalm says, happy is a man who's not followed the counsel of the wicked. He does not take the path of the sinners. He doesn't join the company of the insolent. He's talking about the person who is praiseworthy. The teaching of the Lord is his delight. The Torah of God is his desire, his delight. And in his Torah, he will dwell day and night. So the Talmud comes along. And says, what's going on over here? The grammar is terrible, right? The grammar is terrible in this verse. Why? Because it starts off saying the Torah of God will be his desire. It's the Torah of God that will be your desire. And then it says, and in his Torah he will dwell, he will study day and night. So at first, says Rashi, at first it is called God's Torah. And once he works at it, it's called his Torah. So the says, going back, that's what the Maharal is saying. The Maharal is saying that the mastery of Torah has to be so thorough. You have to be so thorough with your Torah knowledge that someone would think it's your Torah, or Torah, so it's his Torah. No, I think there's something deeper in that, and that is that you've studied some Torah yourself. You know what it's like. The Torah is not a simple. The Torah is not a simple document. It's not a simple book. It's not very apparently. It's not very obviously organized. Its language is difficult. Its concepts are difficult. There's a lot of work that goes into Torah study. You have to bring a lot of yourself to it. You have to bring a lot of your imagination. You have to bring a lot of your tons of memory and experience to understand the Torah. So it starts off as the Torah of Hashem, but when you study it properly and you get to the depth of it, it's the grammar over here is his Torah, but I'm talking to you, so I'm going to say not his, but you. It's your Torah. It's your Torah at the end of the day, because it needed a part of you to become Torah. It's pretty. I haven't studied anything in depth as much as I have Torah. I don't know if there is anything else that you become a master. I have a friend, Abraham knows him, Maestro Tozo, over here. He's a glass blower, and he explained to me, he's called a maestro, a master. So he explained to me what is the difference between an apprentice and a master. When you start working, you get apprenticed to a master, and then you yourself become a master. So he said, an apprentice is able to do everything to copy. He learns the basis of the profession. In his case, it's a glass blower, and you learn to be able to do everything, all the basic strokes. But there's no creativity, and you don't bring yourself to it. When you become a master, that means that you go to the next level where you bring yourself to your profession. So a master of, in the arts, it's used that way. A person becomes a master. In academics also, it's a term that's used, and we're all meant to get master's degrees. Mazel tov to Barry, whose grandson just passed his first exam in Smicha. We're all meant to become rabbis, right? We're all meant to get master's degrees in Torah. It should become ours, that we master it. And the truth is, if to really understand Torah, it's the only way. You have to put yourself into it. You have to throw yourself into it. You have to use every part of your mind, your heart to understand it. Then it becomes yours. So says Rashi on these words, V'shinantam levanecha, you should, let's think if we can come up with a good translation. You should be a master of them and transmit them. You should transmit them as a master, levanecha, to your. Now generally a ben is a son, benecha are children, to your children. So there's a fascinating Rashi over here. Here Rashi says, here the Rashi says, Levanecha, and you shall teach them to your children. These are the disciples. in Hebrew, Elu HaTalmidim. These are your students, meaning that it's not talking about here just your children, right? It's not talking about just your children, but it's talking about your students. That Torah is not only to be taught to one's physical children, but to anyone that's willing to listen. And Rashi says we find that Talmidim are called banim. Students, in some way, are children. Why? Because you have a teacher who's imparting knowledge and guidance upon students, and therefore that's the relationship between children and parents. A teacher, rabbi, takes on a parental role. Shnema, like it says, unbelievably, Rashi says, I'll prove it to you. How do you know that students are called children? Banim atem laHashem Elokecha. Says Rashi, you are children to God. You're children to the Lord your God. Wow. Yeah. It's a Sifri. Rashi is not making this up. It's based on a midrash. What do you mean we're the children of God? So Rashi says we're the students of God because he has taught us the Torah, right? He's taught that we are his students. We're following God's guidance, and Rashi brings different other proofs. It's interesting again. The Goaria, the Maharal says Rashi knew this. The Sifri, the Midrash knew this because it uses the plural levanecha. Levanecha is plural. Yes, sir.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, sir.
So then, if you say that is the definition, and I know that the rabbi to the student is like a parent. For example, if you see your father and your rabbi or teacher in the same situation where it's life or death, there are some what's the right word here? Teachings that you should go for you should go for the rabbi first and not the parent.
Yep.
But then why is it that we are not the children of Moses, who is the ultimate teacher for all of us, because he taught us the Torah that we follow today, direct from Hashem?
I think we are. I don't know why we're not.
We're not called Ben Moshe. We're called Yehudim from Yehuda.
Well, we're called Yisroel and Bnei Yisrael. Why we never got the name of Bnei Moshe? I don't know, Greg. I don't know, but I don't think anything's wrong per se with that name. We are the students of Moshe. We call him Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. Not many people get that name. So yeah, okay, we can think about it. Do some research on that. Let us know on Tuesday what you find.
I'll try my best.
Okay. I just want to point out, the Maharal says an interesting thing. He says that this word, where are we now? It brought us all into view. And this word, levanecha, is plural. In the Torah, it does say, it says, lebincha, ki yeshalcha bincha macha. When your child will ask you tomorrow, what is this that you're doing? And you should tell them that's talking about the Pesach. There it refers to children. It says because of the plural, it should, if it was about children, it should have been consistent to use the singular bincha. So levanecha is plural. Who are these plural children? Many of them, right? He says a person generally has one child at a time. He doesn't have many, but students you can have many at a time. So that was the clue in the actual grammar to tell us it means to one student. Let's see what we had here. Okay, and here's just the verse that we are Banim atem laHashem Elokecha. You are the children of God, the Lord your God, right? You shall not gash yourselves nor shave the frontlets of your head. Why? Because as a student of God, you need to be more elevated than that. But that's the proof. Okay. I want to just look now at the context, because I think there's something really important. There's something special to be learned here. Let's go back to our main verse. Okay, here we are. So let's think of it in terms of what is the role of Talmud Torah in Judaism? Learning Torah, it depends, studying. I think almost all, even all denominations, never mind within the Orthodox world, the different groupings, but even all denominations understand that there is a centrality to learning Torah, right? Learning Torah, studying Torah plays a central role in Judaism. Right? People, yeshivas, people study, we have institutions which people don't think about as study, but they were meant to be that, meaning the laning of the Torah, the reason why the Torah is read in shul on a Shabbos, on a Monday and a Thursday, is that the Jewish people should not go 3 days without Torah, without Torah learning, without Torah study. It's meant to be a public study session. That's why the Torah is being read in public. This is our book. This is our, right? What's the role? What is the mind frame for learning? It's become cultural. It's especially in the yeshiva world that I find myself somewhat. Excuse my pink shirt today. But in the yeshiva world, that is the prime mitzvah, right? That the Torah should be studied, and almost everything revolves around the central occupation of studying Torah, learning Torah. Why is it so important? Why is that the focus, the fixation? I think less so to some degree in the Hasidic world, and then other worlds I'm not too sure about, but everyone knows about, we're the people of the book, right? Even the non-Jews know us as the people of the book. It always frustrates me greatly, by the way, that as the people of the book, which really means the people of education, the people that are educated. We're the most educated throughout history, being the most educated people on earth. But and even so, our schooling systems today are so weak. They're I hate to say it. I think others do a better job. We fail, okay. This is a class about the Shema. Let's focus. So let's try get our I want to look at the context here to answer this major question about what is the role of Talmud Torah. How do you express it? How do you say to someone, you know why it's important to study Torah? Why? Why is it so important? So here you go. Look at the Shema. It starts off, number one, Shema Yisroel. I'm going to do this twice. Okay. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And what did we learned in the Mishnah? That what? Says Rabbi Yeshua ben Kacha, why does the Pasha of Shema come before V'haya im Shema, the next Pasha? Kedei she'yikabel alav all malchus shamayim techila. In order v'achar kach mekabel alav all mitzvahs. First you should, I think the translation's good here. First one should accept upon himself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. And then only after that, accept upon oneself the yoke of the mitzvot, that you got to go ahead and do the mitzvot. So we are establishing our relationship, the prime relationship that we have, the essential relationship we have with God is acknowledging who God is to us. God, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one, He is the only source of all existence. And our job, that is considered the accept upon himself, we accept upon ourselves the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. What's a yoke? A yoke is something you put on oxen in order to pull a plow or something behind them. There's a mission, there's a job over here. What is our job? Our job is Hashem Echad. Our job is to bring to the world this idea that the only true God is Hashem. That's why we created. That's our job as Jews. Hashem Echad. That's being makabel on yourself. That's accepting. My role in life, my job in life is to bring about a state of awareness, a state of being, a state of creation, where everyone can recognize God, Hashem, is one. He's the only true God. How do we do that? How do we do that? So if that's number one, we accept upon ourselves that mission, well, be completely devoted to this. You should love it. All your heart, all your soul, all your might. Complete devotion. And these words should be upon your heart. This should be your primary occupation. These are the words that you should be filled with. This is the activity that you should be filled with. And what's the first thing we do in order to do? These words, according to Rashi, the words of the Torah. And it's through the words of the Torah that we come to recognize God and know Him as such. And then immediately, v'shinantam levanecha, we pass them on to our children. Why? Because the occupation of studying Torah is not so much a individual spiritual experience as much as it is as the fulfillment of our mission as Jews to bring about a perfected world. Right? What the words of the Torah, since we are here to bring out this realization, Hashem Echad, how do we do that? By being filled with the words of Torah. By being filled, what is life about? Right? How do we get to Hashem Echad? The book of Hashem Echad is the book of the Torah. The laws of the Torah, the understanding of the Torah, the intricacies of the Torah. And there's a beautiful Ramban. I want to read this Ramban to you because Ramban really makes a statement. Here it is. Says the Ramban, to put it in English. No, sorry. Says the Ramban, Nachmanides, who after Rashi is considered the second most authoritative or famous commentary on the Torah. He says, teach them to your children, to your students. These mitzvahs, he said, are this is logical, it's clear. We've already been told, the words of the Torah, this covenantal relationship that we have with God is for all generations. This is not a one-time spiritual experience. This is a mission for all generations of Jews in order to bring about the fulfillment of the covenant. As brisi asher tishmu beini ubenechem ubein zarcha acharecha. the covenant between that you shall guard between me and you, and between and your children after you, right? So says the Ramban, this isn't just about us. This is about the world. This is about us as a people bringing about something very wondrous, substantial. Hine anachnu mitzuvuim sheyedu b'neinu, a mitzvahs. We see that this is generational. We're part of the Jewish people. You're a Jew. Our children are Jewish. They need to follow and do the next part of the work, the next link in the chain of the Jewish people. So since we need to tell them, it's essential, this is all part of the Jewish people. They are part of, they're the next generation. We as their teachers are now responsible to teach them. How are they going to know what to do if we don't teach them? So says the Ramban, it's an unbelievable Ramban. He's really, it sounds so simple, but he's making a huge statement over here. He's saying that learning Torah is not about me getting reward for it. You do get reward in the world to come, but it's not my selfish endeavor to have a spiritual experience. It's me finding my place in the historical mission of the Jewish people, and that's quite evident to me when I looked at the Ramban and I see that's really these steps over here. That's why, or the context, should I say? That's the context in which I find that learning Torah and teaching them to my children, to my students, that's the context. That's part of who we are, right? If that's who this is the preoccupation with who we are, with our identity as Jewish people, changing this world, bringing this world to its perfection of Hashem Echad through the Torah that He has given us, and the love that we have for Hashem will be enhanced and also expressed in this way. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, hope that's clear. I probably could say it clearer, but for now that's it. Another way of saying it is that it's part of the love, right? If we love Hashem with all our heart and all our soul, and that's what preoccupies us. As the Sforno said, what did the Sforno say? Over here. The Sforno said, right? You should happily serve God's purpose because there's no greater purpose than that, right? Now, it's a bit of a paradox that the greatest self-service we can do, the greatest self-service is to serve God's purpose, to be part of this grand plan, this mission of history, of God's plan, to play a role in that, to find ourselves humbly. It's not my purpose, it's God's purpose, but I'm able to play a role in that. Wow, what could be greater than that? And that's the greatest merit, right? That's the greatest, we live in a very selfish world, which has become very mundane, very, very lowly in terms of, what people do. Well, be fascinating to, at least this Western world, probably the whole world, what have people been doing for the last 5 months? Many people have not been working. Well, what have they been doing? Netflix must have gone out of, broken all records about how much, there's stupid movies, and okay, now and again you need a movie to relax, but what have people been doing? Where is the elevated occupation of being, of being connected to God, and to even during COVID, we've been able to study Torah, to live in a way that, it hasn't been, broadcast. We haven't been able to do a lot of the mitzvahs, but we still had so much. We still had an infinite amount. Maybe it was time to really introspect and think about, what are we doing? Do we do enough? Are we following the right path, etc. And as the Sforno says, there's no greater purpose. This is the most elevated, greatest aim. Tachlit nichbad kazeh. What greater occupation? What are you going to do? To play, drink another bottle of wine. Are you going to go watch some spectacular sports event? Or are you going to go to some concert? What could be greater than Ahavas Hashem, than being connected to God, and being meriting to be part of the mission of this world, of bringing of bringing this realization, bringing this state of being to our world. So, that's the context that should be. I think, unfortunately, it's become too cultural. People just learn because that's what we do. But to take a step back and say, why do we learn? What is the context of our learning? And this Vishinantam Levanecha, why does, right? We put it in a simple way. Why is the mitzvah to learn Torah and to teach Torah we could say it even to learn Torah. Why is the mitzvah to learn Torah in the context of teaching? Because it's not a selfish spiritual experience. It's actually part of it's being part of the mission of the Jewish people. And it's through the Torah, it's through, like what Rashi said, Vishinantam, that this clarity, it's becoming part of us. Right, our way. How are we going to bring this Hashem Echad? By living in a way of the Torah. Hashem's told us how to do it. He gave us the Torah. He said, "This is how you're going to do it. This is how you fulfill your mission." So we need to become masters of that. That needs to be. We know exactly what to do. So that's our preoccupation as a Jew, is being full of this relationship with God, this love for God, this connection to God, and His Torah as an expression of that, and a fulfillment of that. Okay, so very good. We managed to do another 2 words. Always good to get ahead over here in the Shema. Any questions?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
Because I've wondered about this a lot. I know that our role is to illuminate the world with monotheism, but this has been done by proxy over the last 2,000 years to the Christians, and also to a degree Islam, because they, there's only one moral voice here internationally, and that is the Pope. We've been relegated to 2,000 years to the ghettos. So it's almost by proxy as God is used, what they were called the New Jews originally, the first Christians, has used those mediums to get out there where we, to our own sins or whatever, have been relegated into a survival basis, which has worked very well for us to survive over the Middle Ages by being relegated to ghettos. So can it be accepted that what we have, our message has gone out through the Christians, not to us?
So I believe there's a Ramban, Maimonides, that that deals with this question. And he does give some credence to it. I'm not sure as much as you are. I think he says it as, they're preparing the world for the coming of the Messiah. So, but I would imagine that where, there is some realization, and they have definitely brought some knowledge to the world about Hashem, about God. Christianity is a question, but let's say they have.
Monotheism.
Yeah.
That's been spread by them.
Yeah, that they've spread the idea that there is a one God. But do people know that one God? What's the nature of that? You see, God really, at the end of days, that's why Mashiach is such an important concept in Judaism, because that's the fulfillment of creation. That people will come to know God. People know of God. Probably we ourselves would put ourselves in that category. How many of us could say we know God? We know of God, but do we know God? So at the end of days, that's really meant to happen, that there's a revelation of God in this world. God reveals himself to this world to the degree that people will come to know him. And that apparently happens through the Jewish people. That's where that's why we haven't given up. That's why we're stiff-necked, because that's who we are. And that's really our role, is still waiting. You're right, we've been relegated. We're not the focus, but in the end, it will come through us. Whether it comes through how God redeems us, whether it comes through us being able to form an exemplary nation in the land of Israel, possibly. There's enough communication in the world. There's enough communication methods that if we formed an exemplary community in the land of Israel, the whole world could learn about it and say, wow, those are the ways of God. That's what the people live like. So I think where Christianity and Islam have brought about the awareness of a God, the role of the Jewish people is to bring an awareness of God, which is a lot deeper, and a lot more significant.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, folks. Well, have a good Shabbos, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay.